I think there's a big issue here in terms of how the housing problem is viewed. I think clearly there's a housing problem across the UK, particularly with the supply of housing. I think if you look at the price of housing, I think that really brings that out. And there's been a lot of debate about that at a national level. I think the big issue, however, is that although we need more houses, we don't necessarily need more houses everywhere. And the housing issue looks very different in some places than it does in others. There's a short-term angle in terms of the recession and trying to sort of boost economic growth, but I think there's also a longer-term issue as well for cities and housing growth. I think in the short term, it's fairly well accepted that building an extra 100,000 homes would increase GDP by 1% or add 1% to GDP. But I think from the longer term point of view, actually there's sort of a very big constraint that housing could have on the future of certainly our most prosperous cities. And I think that actually by trying to increase the supply of housing within these places and to try and sort of manage the affordability issue that they face will then make these cities more attractive both to people coming in, looking for work, for businesses wanting to set up in those cities, and also for the residents actually being able to stay within those cities and access the job opportunities that are available within them. There's been lots of made about the North-South divide, and clearly in general there is a pattern that you see that the cities in the south, particularly in this greater southeast, tend to perform very well, whereas cities in the north tend to perform a little bit more weakly. However, it's not as simple as that. If you dig down a little bit deeper, you find that particularly cities such as York, Preston and Leeds tend to perform very well. And I think what we see is that actually in the greater southeast, cities there tend to perform well across the board. Whereas in the north, it tends to be much more patchy, where you have some very strong performers, but also you have some much weaker performers too. I think what we also find is that the impact of the recession has been very varied too. And we see that some cities were hit very hard early on and have recovered quite well. But we also see that some other cities have been hit actually much harder later on in the recession. Their recovery has been very weak.